I'm Tabby.
And I'm Caitlin, and today we are going to talk about the first Crescent City book, House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J Maas.
And let me just tell you guys, we put some freaking work into this one.
You guys aren't ready.
My mind was blown the first time I read it. I read it 4 times, and on this fourth read through, I was like, oh my gosh, I missed even more.
Yeah. Yes. Honestly, there's so many more details that I did not remember till I read it again. So it's wild because the first time you read this book, you're just confused.
You're like,
I'm
there's
not
a
gonna lie.
lot going on here.
First, I will go ahead and just read the back of the book. So it says, bound by blood, tempted by desire, unleashed by destiny. Bryce Quinlan had the perfect life, working hard all day and partying all night, until a demon murdered her closest friends, leaving her bereft, wounded, and alone. When the accused is behind bars, but the crimes start up again, Bryce finds herself at the heart of the investigation. She'll do whatever it takes to avenge their deaths. Hunt Athalar is a notorious fallen angel, now enslaved to the archangels he once attempted to overthrow. His brutal skills and incredible strength have been set to one purpose: to assassinate his boss's enemies, no questions asked. But with a demon wreaking havoc in the city, he's offered an irresistible deal. Help Bryce find the murderer, and his freedom will be within reach. As Bryce and Hunt dig deep into Crescent City's underbelly, they discover a dark power that threatens everything and everyone they hold dear. And they find, in each other, a blazing passion, one that could set them both free if they'd only let it.
So, in terms of ratings, if I was going based on Sarah J Maas series, it's probably my second favorite. So, like, I would say like a 9.3 out of 10. There were some
For
parts I didn't
me,
love. It was a little slow.
yes. So, okay, I guess it depends on which read through I'm talking about because my first read through, I liked it a little bit less than I did the second time through because I was a little confused.
Yeah.
So my first read through, I guess, would be a little lower, but as of right now, oh, there's a couple things I might change about it. So I'm gonna say like a 9.8 out of 10.
Yeah, just based off of like the sheer connections I'm making right now, like it's a very high rate for me because like she put a lot into like drawing it back, which we'll talk about.
Yeah, really. And like I know not everyone loves Sarah J Maas's work, but
Yeah.
like what she has done is just objectively impressive. Like with this
Yeah.
particular like interconnected multiverse that she's got going on here. So I just think she objectively is a very creative person, uh,
Yes.
regardless of your preferences.
And it's like at this point she's created three completely separate different worlds, and I don't know, there's a lot of thought that goes into that, and it's crazy
Yeah.
to me.
Even if I wasn't the biggest fan of her work, which I really do love her work, I think
Yeah.
I would still appreciate it very much because
Well,
it's
and just what a
impressive.
fresh take she's taken to on like the whole world of like Fae. Because I feel like
Yeah.
that has been like a very overdone genre the last couple years. Like it's
Mhm.
really just everyone's doing it. And so I love that it's set in more of like a modern time.
Yes.
Um, and
That's one
it's
of the
like,
things I really love about this series. I think it's like the juxtaposition of it is amazing, especially
yeah,
with like the war that's going on between the veneer and the
yeah,
humans because they talk about like magic versus machines and
which is super cool. So before we really hop into the heart of it, I do want to just kind of quickly cover again the different houses that are in Midgard because I was so confused the first time I read this book. I'm like, where are we? It's a different planet. It's a different everything. Like I was
yeah.
confused. So there's 4 houses on the planet Midgard. Midgard is separated into a bunch of different territories. So they live in what was formerly called Lunathia, now it's Crescent City. There's also Pangera, which is across the sea, and that's where a bulk of like the fighting is.
Hmm.
But the 4 houses are House of Earth and Blood. And so in that you have your shifters, humans, witches, regular animals, and many others who Chthona calls, as well as some chosen by Luna. So Chthona and Luna are 2 of the gods they worship. And then there's House of Sky and Breath. So you have the Malakim, which are the angels, the Fae, the elementals, the sprites who were actually kicked out of House of Sky and Breath
For
because
the
they,
rebellion.
yeah. And then those who are blessed by Solus, along with some favored by Luna, because the Fae worship Luna. And then you have House of Many Waters. So that's going to be like your river spirits, your myrrh, water beasts, nymphs, kelpies, nox, and others watched by Ogenis, which is the water goddess. And then you have the House of Flame and Shadow, which is probably the least known out of all of them. But that's going to be your Demonaki, your Reapers, Wraiths, Vampires, Draki, Dragons, Necromancers, and many wicked and unnamed things that even Erd herself cannot use. Sorry. There's a lot going on. There were so many different types of beings that I thought it'd be good to just
And that's what makes
cover.
this world so interesting, is because of like all of these creatures came to be because of the northern and southern rifts. And so we'll
Yes.
get more into that whenever we dive into our theory corner.
Which is why this war against the humans is so crazy, because 15,000 years prior to that, only humans and regular animals lived in what they now call Midgard, and the Vanir basically took over. And so for this entire 15,000 years, the humans have been trying to regain that power they lost. So we'll start with just going over some of the characters in this book. There's a lot.
Yes.
There's a
Yeah.
lot of characters, but it's important to cover them all because they all play their own special role in the book. It is very, very interwoven. So we do have our first main character. It's Bryce Quinlan. She is a baddie, first of
She
all,
is.
but
Yeah.
she's also a ride or die. And
Like straight up, there's like this thing in Midgard where whenever a person dies, they send their body across the sea towards the bone quarter. But it's like if their boat tips, then that means their soul is deemed unworthy. So Bryce literally went and like made a deal with the freaking the Shadow King, Under King. I couldn't remember his name. She was like, "Listen, I don't care what it takes. You can have my soul. Just make sure Danica makes it over here." Like she literally sold her soul for her best friend.
which I do think Danica probably would have made it across herself. And I actually do have some theories too about Bryce's afterlife anyway, and I don't think it's going to end up mattering. But what a good friend to have. And Hunt even says that too. He's like, man, I would kill to have a friend who like loved me like that. She just went through so freaking much. Like even like as a young child, like she was cast out by her father. You know, she had to deal with being a half fae, which was really frowned upon. They're not really high up in society, so the fact that she's even like a citizen is crazy to everybody. And then, you know, the only friends she's ever had were killed in a very gruesome, terrible way. The person that she thought she was gonna spend the rest of her life with was in a pulp of meat on the floor.
Horrifying.
Yeah, and so she's her journey throughout this book was super cool, and I felt like we got to see a lot of self-growth. And something that I really, really love about most of the main female characters that Sarah J Maas writes is that they always have a secret plan that they're not willing to tell anybody about. So even if there is, you know, a main goal, like they're gonna have some side quests that they're taking in order to reach it.
And I do think that part of that is because these characters that she's created, they have like reasons not to trust people. Then we have Hunt Athalar, who is a fallen angel who led the rebellion against the archangels.
We don't really know a ton about him.
Yeah, like we just know like he is enslaved. He works for the archangel governor Micah, and Micah basically uses him as his personal assassin, which is horrible.
Yes, I don't know. Hunt is not my favorite male character ever written. I do think he redeemed himself quite a bit because I was not ready to forgive him. Bryce was like, it's okay, like what you did was fine. And it's like, I don't know. Like I still feel like it's maybe not fine. Like I know he was trying to do like the synth stuff, like to save himself and like the other slaves, but
it really
like
was a
that
stupid
was
idea.
pretty jacked up.
I definitely agree. The thing is, like, I have heard a lot of people say, just in their opinion, the characters in Crescent City, just they don't vibe with them like they vibe with Sarah J Maas's other characters. But I think that it's because, and this is just my opinion, I think it's because we can see ourselves a little more in these characters.
Yeah.
Like, it's more modern, first of all. Like, the issues are more modernized. And so it's like these like situations and stuff that they get into just kind of feel more relevant to us. And I think
Sure.
that it's like, I don't know, it's easier to just be like, well, what an idiot. I'd never do that. But like Feyre and Reese and all of them, they all did some stupid shit in
They
ACOTAR.
did.
And like everyone's so quick to forgive them, but I feel like it's not necessarily the same for like Hunt and Bryce.
Right.
I
It
personally
was
love
different
them.
problems, different everything. And like I do love the way they did problem solve them. I feel like they use their heads a little more than they did in maybe any of the other series. Because it's like they were all keeping their own secrets. And so it's like you can't really fault any specific one for anything because they're all at fault,
Yeah,
basically.
I know. And that's the thing is like all of these characters, yes, they all have reasons to like be upset with them, like, but I
But
just,
also they can't be because they still got stuff that they're hiding.
yes, I know. And like, it really draws me to them. I love these characters.
I think what I really liked about this book too is that yes, I did like the two main characters, but I also loved all the supporting characters. Like,
If
and
not, love them more than the
yeah, I
main
think I
characters.
maybe like them a little bit more than Bryce and Hunt
I do
because
too.
like, I don't know, they were so different. It was just very refreshing to see that. And like in ACOTAR, you have like the inner circle, and the inner circle is awesome, but I don't think you really got to see them as much as you do the other side
Yes.
characters in this book.
Especially in the second book.
Yes.
Like it just goes into it so much more.
And I like that too
But we
because
do
it's
get
almost
quite
like
a bit of like Rune
no
in
one's
this
a
book.
main character in the second book.
Yeah, I know. It
They're
makes
all
it
main characters.
feel more like a movie to me too, and I like that.
I love it. So yeah, I thought she did something really cool with this one. They do develop even more in the second book, and I'm really excited to talk about it. Just not, I don't know. I was a little underwhelmed by them, I think.
That's fair. I feel that.
Rune Dannon, my only love,
Yeah.
like what an
But
incredible man,
yeah, and we were
male.
talking about this, and we didn't feel that way about him until we read the second book.
It's true. He
But
felt very overbearing in the first book. I did like all the scenes with his dad though, because
mhm,
we got so much interesting information like about their dynamic, but also about like the history of the Fae. His family that lives in Avalon is
yeah.
very, very interesting to me, which I'll talk about in a little bit.
During Theory Corner.
But Rune is just such a new, refreshing character. I don't know. He's interesting.
He is very interesting. Speaking of interesting and fresh characters, Lahaba, our little queen,
Rest in peace.
she is not only is she fun and flirty and a good time, she is a fucking hero.
She is. She deserves a statue in like a library named after her.
It hurt so much.
I wrote down all the quotes from her. Like right before she died, I was like, stop it immediately.
I really, really wish that we hadn't lost her, like seriously, because it like to me, the first time I read this book, I was like sad when Danica and the Pack of Devils died, but we hadn't really gotten to
I
know
wasn't
them when they
attached to
died.
them.
Yeah. It's like in the book, you don't really get to know and love Danica until the end of the book. And at that point, she's already gone. So it's like a different process. But
But it's
Lahaba,
also
oh,
like, I don't know. I'll talk about Danica too, because I'm not sure about her.
well, I have an opinion about that as well. And well, did you have anything else to say about Lahaba before we talk about Danica?
No, just the fact that even though Lahaba knew she was free and still chose to die for her friends, I think that really says a lot about who she was as a person. She was a great, piece of comedic relief.
Yeah.
Her love for Syrinx was so funny.
I know.
I
The fact
love
that she
their
was always like, Syrinx says this. I'm like, can she actually talk to
I
Syrinx?
think she can.
I love that. Lahaba is honestly, she might be my favorite character in the entire
She
book.
is my favorite, and I'm sad that she's not in any of the others. However, Sarah J Maas does make up for it in the second book, and I think
Yeah,
it's cute.
that is cute.
Danica.
Yeah, Danica.
I honestly did not care for Danica's character.
Mhm.
I thought she was very sneaky. I do think deep in her heart she did have Bryce's safety as a priority.
Yeah.
However, I do think she had a different agenda, and
Yeah.
it came before Bryce's safety.
Well, I think Danica was the ultimate alpha hole.
Yeah,
Like
she was.
Bryce was literally always talking about how she didn't like, well, and she even did joke about it because she told Connor like there's no room for any more alpha holes in her life because she already had Danica.
Yeah.
But like she seriously was everything that Bryce said she didn't want.
It's
But
because she already had it.
yeah, and okay, so for me, I felt the very same way the first time I read the book. Second time through, I had like this newfound outlook on Danica because I've read the second book now as well. You
Sure.
know, so that affected my opinion of her. I think that Danica, there's a lot to unpack, but it's like most of our knowledge about her and her relationship with Bryce is given to us after she's already dead. So it's like Bryce is being betrayed by Danica after she's already gone. So it's like we have to learn to forgive her through Bryce's lens. And it's very complex because if you think about like if you lost someone that you really loved and then after they died you learn that they kept all these secrets from you, like that would be so hurtful, but you couldn't talk it out with them. Like they're gone.
Right.
So it's just like it's such a complex like depiction of grief and like forgiveness. I think it's like I've never read a book where a character is like that, where like they've died, but they're still betraying the person that loved them.
Yeah, and it like even can, I mean, we'll talk about in the next book too, like, but it continues on even into the second book.
Yes.
And it's one of those things where it's like you just really don't know what to think because there are so many different aspects of what's going on, like playing a role in like the total outcome of what's happening.
Yeah.
That like same thing, there's not one single character that you're like, yeah, you're right and you're wrong.
I know. Because in the second book, we'll learn even more about Danica's motives and the
It's like
reason why
nobody's really
she was
right,
doing these things.
nobody's really wrong except for one specific group.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I don't know, her character is strange because like they built her up that whole first couple chapters to be, like this all-powerful alpha, and she's going to become like the leader of all of the wolves, not even just the Valbaran ones, but like everyone on the planet, and then they just kill her off.
Yeah. And her death was humiliating too. Like
Yeah.
the audio recording had her like it caught her begging for her life. And to them, like that's
A coward's death.
embarrassing. Yeah, like, and I would be begging for my life as well, but like to them, like she's supposed to be tough until the end. So I think Danica's very complex, and honestly, like I would go to bat for her. Like I would defend her character. Mostly
I
because
don't
I
think I
think her
would.
character is that's fair. That's
I
fair.
don't think I would.
I think her character is I can't think of like the word that I want to use, but I think her character causes us to empathize in situations where it's difficult to do
I
so.
am empathetic towards her because her mom is terrible. Like
Hmm.
for that, I do feel bad for her because it sounds like she grew up in absolute hell.
Yeah,
Like,
that's true.
but Sabine is also correct that Danica was extremely just disrespectful and kind of did whatever she wants. And as
Yes.
much as I don't like Sabine, I feel like again, neither of them are right, neither of them are wrong.
Yeah. But then we learned that some of the things that she was doing that seemed like rebellious and like
Was for a
irresponsible were
greater
for noble causes
right.
because the land that they live in is not fair. Like it's not a
No,
fair world. So
I don't
we'll
know.
we'll move on from Danica just
She's
because
a
we could
complex
probably talk about
character.
her for an hour,
Yes.
which is ironic because of how little she is in the book.
Micah. Micah is fine as hell, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But he is like the ultimate bad guy.
Yeah. He is
He gives me the
a fuck boy.
heebie-jeebies.
He's a major fuck boy. Bryce knows it the minute she sees him. She's like, I'm not interested.
And it's like he does try. So this is why they're all neat characters, but his character is interesting because he's manipulative.
Mm-hmm.
So he portrays himself to be this really good dude, and everyone in their city thinks he's a good dude because of how bad the other archangels are.
Yeah.
And so it's like, yeah, like we've got it really good here because it could always be worse.
Yeah.
And so,
like, well, he's not torturing us in a dungeon. So,
well, and it's like he's like a patron of the arts and he invests in all these things, which we do later find out is because he is using them.
Yeah.
But he also seems like the good guy compared to the like again the other archangels. And so when Hunt and the other Triari members are sold to Micah, I think he's made deals with all of them separately, first of all, or he's elevated them to different statuses. He gives them a salary, he gives them days off, and so everyone's like, yeah, Micah's a good dude.
Yeah, it's like even though we're literally his slaves, he pays us. He doesn't have to pay us.
Yeah. I don't know, like you could almost tell he was just doomed to be the bad guy.
Yeah.
Like no one's that good, especially the archangels.
I don't know what I was thinking the first time I read it through because I can't remember, but I don't think that I expected him to be like the ultimate bad guy. I think I was a little bit surprised, so he fooled me.
I did think initially the first time I read it that I thought somehow the Asteri were going to be more involved than they actually were, but no, they're just like this higher being that we don't really see or hear from until the end. And so I think that's probably why I was most confused because they'd introduced like these great high powers.
Yes.
And then it's like, and then we have Micah.
And I also thought it was going to have more to do with Hell and the Princes of Hell.
Yeah,
but
she just introduced so many characters that you're like, I actually don't know who's bad. Yeah. And then she throws in the wrench with Hunt, like doing the synth deal and stuff. And you're like, oh shit, well, maybe it was Hunt the whole time.
I know. But I knew like, and this is probably just because it was like too early on. I knew it wasn't the Viper Queen. I knew it wasn't Sabine because I was like, Sabine's a bitch, but she did not kill her own daughter.
No, Sabine is terrible. But she's not that terrible.
Yeah, like she is a really bad person, but not like that. But then, so besides Hunt, we have some other notable members of Micah's Triari. We have Isaiah, who is the commander of the Legion. He's honestly a pretty good homie. He helps Hunt quite a bit. There's also Victoria, who's a Wraith. And they're all
members of the 33rd, but they were in the 18th, which was the fallen unit.
Yes. Victoria is, as punishment, is trapped in the same body forever, but apparently she's still good looking. So
yeah, it's like she was trapped in a veneer's body. So it's like it's still aging very slowly.
Yeah, so it's fine.
In terms of wraiths, like it's very old.
Yeah, because normally they just switch it out. Naomi's captain of the 33rd, and Justinian is apparently the youngest member, and he loves to annoy Hunt, which is kind of cute. He's like a little brother, I feel like. But
we don't really know a lot about them except for Isaiah.
Yeah, Isaiah's really the most developed.
I actually think at this point Victoria, Naomi, and Justinian are all dead.
Yeah, so they have all been punished by
well, Naomi died in the battle. No, she didn't die, actually. Wait. She did not die. Naomi wasn't part of the synth deal.
Okay.
No, Naomi's in the second book, so scratch that. Gotcha. She lived.
Yeah, so Victoria gets like trapped in a box and
they steal her soul out of the body.
It's really fucked up, man. But hey, she got out of that body that she was doomed to live in forever. So
yeah,
upgrade.
Which I wonder if like she maybe comes back later because it's
like I think she's gonna come back.
She's gotta have to come back.
They made such a big deal about her
about exactly where she's at in the sea.
Yeah, like somebody's gonna go get her. She'll be fine.
I do think someone has retrieved her.
But boy, oh boy, is she gonna be pissed when she gets out of that box.
Justinian is 100% dead. Rest in peace.
He did get killed.
He's gone.
So yeah.
Amber and Randall, they're two of my favorite characters. Actually, no, I go back. Everyone is problematic except for Amber and Randall because
you know what? Yeah.
All she was trying to do was make sure that her daughter was protected from a terrible, terrible man. And who can fault a mother for that?
Yes,
Certainly not me.
She got seduced by the freaking wealthy,
at 18
powerful,
years old
king, fake king. Of course she did. It's not her fault.
Yeah, Amber and Randall deserve the entire world. Randall, what a pure man.
Because like you could argue he's probably a war criminal, but it was against his will. He was not interested in serving in the military, but
he was required to serve in the military.
Yeah, it's like if they don't, they basically just enslave
their lives are forfeit and then their families get enslaved.
Yeah, they either kill them or enslave them, whichever is more suited to the Republic's needs.
Randall would have 100% been enslaved because he was the best sharpshooter.
Yeah, he would have. He would have been turned into
that sucks, man. Anyway. Yeah. No, I love that even though Amber is so incredibly protective of Bryce, Randall's like, you're still going to learn how to fight, though.
Yes. Yeah.
And thank God he did.
It pays off.
I love that Amber stood up to the Autumn King. Like, she's basically like, yeah, if you care that much, like, come find me, but I know you won't because you're a coward.
Yeah. Honestly, the Autumn King is a pussy.
He is. No, and when he calls her and starts screaming at her, and she was like, and what about it? Like, what are you going to do?
I dare
He's
you.
Like, I guess. Ember's a bad bitch, and Randall is a man wife, for sure.
For sure.
Love that for them.
Speaking of the Autumn King, he sucks.
Again, I know he's hot, though.
Yeah, I know he's hot. He's fake. And something interesting about his powers is that they are fire powers, which is the common like Fae power among the Valbaran Fae. But his son Rune tends to have more of the shadow powers and the
Avalon powers.
The Avalon Fae.
So, I actually have a lot to talk about the Autumn King during Theory Quarter, because I think there is a lot more going on with him than he's let on.
Because he acts like he's just sitting there in his little study doing nothing but
doing projects, and he's trying to find patterns, which again, I am going to discuss.
Yes.
Because he's a little skeevy prick. Next, we have the frat pack. We have Tristan and Declan. I love their characters.
They're so cute.
They're so cute. Tristan, he's a douche, but we love him.
Yeah.
Like, he is just a little spoiled rich boy who I think has overcome his family's uppityness and has really made his way for himself. Yeah. And then Declan, who is just cool. Like, he's a genius. He's a hacker.
He's our little nerdy boy.
He is so precious to me.
He's very gorgeous to me.
I love Declan. And I just love their love for Rune and the friendship that they have.
They did their ordeals together, which is so cute.
It reminds me a lot of like the Valkyrie in A Court of Silver Flames. Like, I feel like it's that level of camaraderie.
I agree.
I love that. Tristan Flynn is also very interesting because he is a son of a lord. And so, again, he has like an elevated status. And he also has earth magic, which is like super, super rare for Valbaran Fae. And they're not really sure where it came from. Same thing with Declan. He is from just like, I think, a common family. They're not super well off or anything. But he is not only a genius, he can also heal people, which is a super, super rare Fae ability. And so mixed with Rune's super rare abilities, they are quite the little pack of people.
They are quite the dynamic trio, if you will.
Yeah. They've got a lot going for them, which is why everyone's so scared of them.
Love that for them.
Yeah. How special.
Then we have Fury and June, who are Bryce's other friends. But they kind of, like, they aren't as close as they used to be. but prior to Danica's death. So Fury is Vanir, but we don't know what kind, and we don't know what house she belongs to.
Which I'm going to talk
Which
about.
I'm also going to talk about. They just know that she made the drop at age 21 because she was forced to, which is interesting.
Which is sus.
Sus. They met her at university, but it was just a front because she's actually a mercenary. But she's a really good friend. So
everyone was super scared of her.
My favorite is like the introduction to Fury is when Bryce is standing outside the club at the very beginning. She just comes up to Bryce and puts a knife to her throat, and she's like, "Oh, you got to be more vigilant, girly."
Like, stay sharp, honey. No,
So
and like
up.
Fury pissed me off, but also I get it. Because it's like she probably has a lot going on as a mercenary for the Republic. She should have been a better friend to Bryce, especially after June told her that she had literally tried to jump off of a roof.
And Fury's like, "Hey, haven't we all?
You know, we've all been there, so nothing special."
And
but I
Bryce
also
is half human.
I think it was like part of her coping mechanism. And I also just have this deep inclination that she knows more about Danica than Bryce does. And so, like, maybe she stayed away because she couldn't talk about it. I'm not sure. That's just a guess, but I don't know.
Yeah.
There's a lot to Fury. She's a wild character.
She's fun, though.
I do like her. I just think there's a lot more to her that we don't know yet.
Yeah, I agree. We also have June, and she's a fawn, so
she's cutie. She's a cutie.
She kind of looks like a deer as well, but is really gorgeous. Like, she is apparently so stunningly beautiful. She dances, and she is like the first fawn to like be in this dance company and be like a star or something. I can't remember what record she's setting, but it's something important, because there's a lot of social commentary woven throughout the book about social status, and it kind of is like an allusion to racism in our real world. So
which I think is like an ongoing thing in a lot of SJM's books, because in like ACOTAR they also have like the lesser fae, and then they have the high fae, and so she's really trying to push that there is definitely a discrepancy between the two.
And then that's not even to mention like the disdain the fae have for humans and vice versa.
Exactly. Which is how it is in all of them.
Yeah. So June is a really good friend. She keeps Bryce, from jumping off a roof.
I think it kind of freaked her out.
That scene, or like Bryce remembering that, is really heavy. But another scene that like really struck me is when the club gets bombed and Bryce can't stand to lose anyone else, so she jumps to protect June, and June gets mad at her because she's made the drop and Bryce hasn't. She literally slaps her across the face because she's so upset,
which I think was completely valid.
Yeah. And it's just like that scene, it's an emotional one. And it's just kind of like right in the middle of the book, just sprinkled in, and we're like moving on. But I think that one is really telling of a lot of Bryce's character.
Yeah. I mean, she is selfless to the point of like stupidity.
Yeah.
Which is how the main character in Throne of Glass is, which is how Rhysand is in like ACOTAR. It's like there's a lot of ongoing themes in these books, is that like selflessness over anything else.
Yeah. They're all basically just masochistic.
Like, they don't care if they die as long as everyone else is fine.
Yeah, and it's like, hey girl, that's not how that works, because Danica died.
There are people who love you. Well. Like, your mom would not survive that. Hypaxia. So, June and Fury are also madly in love, and I think that's very cute. Yeah. Hypaxia is the daughter of Hecuba, who is the late Witch King. She is very secretive. There's a lot about Hypaxia that we still don't know. We know that she was raised like in a forest somewhere.
Yes. In a forest with like ancient tutors.
The other witches are super weirded out by her. Like, same. She is strange.
Yeah.
Very strange. And then she also worked at as a med witch in Crescent City before she took on her role because she wanted some independence because she's been living in a forest for the last 25 years.
Yeah.
The witches are very interesting. And again, I'll cover a little more about this, but there's a lot of ties to witches in Throne of Glass that you could see quite a bit in this book as well. And so I don't know if she has ulterior motives or not, but I do think there are a lot of strange things that happen in the book that make me maybe not trust her that much. Like her just happening to be on the scene when Hunt gets attacked and she just had vials ready to take the poison. And
because she runs into Rune quite a bit as well at the beginning. And it's kind of like, is that orchestrated? Because she knows who he is, obviously.
Well, and she also knows that there's a proposal coming and she shuts it down super fast. And she's like, yeah, I'm not in the market, but I am going to try to, string you along to get some information out of you.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that was just to like feel him out or what, but she just appears at weird times and it's very convenient for her.
Yeah, I could see it because that would be a little unexpected too, based on like what we know of her character traits. It would be a little unexpected for her to actually be
well, and we don't know
conniving.
how the witch queen died.
Yeah.
Like that was all very secretive.
Because it was unexpected as well.
It was very unexpected. No one likes her. And so I really feel like there's more to her character.
Yeah, you're right. That's something to keep our eye on.
I don't really trust her. I don't think.
And then we have the Viper Queen.
I loved her.
She's
I don't
amazing.
know about you.
She's a serpentine shifter and head of the meat market. She is super sketch. I love her. Her bodyguards are a bunch of fae who have defected from the Autumn King, and they're like addicted to a venom that she gives out. She gives out this like hypnotic venom.
Yeah, basically like ties them to her.
Yeah. It's creepy. And it's like, okay, so this is a quote directly from the book. It says, her power was rumored to be different, something extra that mixed with her venom, something strange and old.
I wrote that down too.
Okay, because I'm like, strange and old. So did she come through like a rift, maybe?
No one knows how old she is.
Yeah, no one knows how old she is. Also, she casually runs a fight club, which I think is kind of funny. But because of like her old and strange magic and something that she says to Bryce, she reminds me of a street urchin version of Amryn. Like she's just a little Rugrat Amryn.
She actually reminds me of a character from Throne of Glass, which I won't tell you because you're still reading it.
Yeah, I'm not.
But I did make a comment on it.
Okay.
In my theories, because the way she like enholdens people to her is very, very similar to another character who kind of does the same thing.
Interesting. Yeah, so obviously I didn't know about that character, but I would agree then.
That character is ancient.
Yes.
So whenever they said it was something strange and old, I was like, oh my God. Okay.
That makes sense. Yeah, I guess personality-wise, she just reminds me more of Amryn because she told Bryce, look toward where it hurts the most. That's always where the answers are. And I was like, that's something that Amryn would say to Feyre.
Yeah, so Viper Queen's legit. Love her. Jessica is, out of literally everyone else in this book, Jessica's my favorite.
I do love Jessica.
And it is because she plays so many different roles throughout this story.
Yeah,
it's like,
are you woman, like,
are you evil? Well, no, but you also work for the Underking. But we also find out that you are the caretaker of this ancient library. But we also find out you're in cahoots with the Princes of Hell and you know some secrets about Hunt that we don't know. And so it's like, who are you? First of all, I think she's older than 400 years.
Oh, yeah, like she just lies about how old she is.
Well, because all we hear is about this enchantress defecting, right? Mm-hmm. And nobody knows anything about her prior to that, like who she belonged to, what coven she was in, nothing. And so I think she is probably super, super old. And again, I don't want to drop too many things right now, but she's a key player, and I know that.
Huh.
She is heartless, but she's not, because she loves Bryce dearly, and she would never
Yeah,
say that, but she does love her so much.
I know. It's
Um,
like she would never admit that she's ever had an emotion besides anger, but she does.
she is like a scary aunt.
Yeah, I do love her.
Uh,
You know who I don't love? Sabine.
yeah, Sabine sucks.
She's just
I hate her
awful.
character.
The her immediate reaction when Danica and the pack were slaughtered was to accuse Bryce of
Where's
stealing the
my
sword.
sword?
Yeah, and call her a slut. I was like, girl, be
She's like,
fucking
well,
for
my
real.
daughter couldn't keep her mouth shut. And it's like, well, she's dead, so
I
who cares?
know. She is so evil. It's wild.
Sandriel, also evil and wild, and I hate her, and I'm glad she's dead. Honestly, I'm glad her sister's dead too. They all suck. I hope
Yeah.
Shahar does not rest in peace.
Yeah,
He
she
sounded
also was
manipulative.
manipulative. And yes.
At least Sandriel was upfront about it.
And then just to kind of like run through these real quick, because they'll be more important in the second book, but these are members of Sandriel's Triarii. So there's Pollux the Hammer. That's his nickname, the Hammer.
Call the hammer.
He was the commander. Lydia Servos the Hind is the Republic's most notorious spy hunter and Pollux's lover. She's a deer shifter. There's the Harpy and the Hawk and the Hellhound.
And then we have Hunt, who was the hunter
Yes.
when he was in their triary. And I was like, wow, how fun. What a
Mm-hmm.
fun group that you've accumulated.
Aren't they just?
Like, we love the H's. You've really done
Honestly.
something cute there. But they all suck. They're all scary.
Yeah,
Hunt
they're
doesn't
all
like any of
assholes.
them, but he especially doesn't like Pollux because he likes to torture people for fun.
Yeah.
So we'll find out more about the Triari, unfortunately, in the next book.
Unfortunately. But it's kind of fun.
They do play a role in the next book. So then we have the Asteri, which we don't know a ton about the Asteri, except that they came across the rift 15,000 years ago with everyone else. They've basically they're stars that are in like a humanoid form that rule over all of Midgard. Everyone answers to the Asteri. The Bright Hand, which I don't know what the Bright Hand means, but that's Rigelus, and he's kind of like their spokesperson. He's like the main head of the Asteri. They have basically wiped any information prior to them taking power, so no one really knows anything about them except for what was written in history.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why what Jessica was doing was so wrong in their eyes, because she had manuscripts from before the crossing of the
Yes.
Northern Rift.
Yeah, from Parthos, which was the ancient human civilization that existed prior to the Veneer
Yes.
coming over. And then also the Asteri, they have there are 6 of them, but there were 7, but they have a fallen sister that gets referred to a lot, who was apparently
Sirius.
eaten by the Prince of the Pit, who is the like most powerful Prince of Hell.
And Sirius was the wolf star, which wolves come up a lot in this book.
Yes.
And so I was like, I think that's an ongoing thing that'll come back up later, probably. I'm so intrigued by the Princes of Hell.
Same.
And I want to know about each and every one of them.
I do too. But speaking of, let's talk about Adis.
Yeah, let's talk about him.
Adis is the Prince of the Chasm. So he is like level 5. There are only 2 levels below him. When Bryce was 13, she went to the Oracle. And the Oracle like gives you your prophecy or whatever. But when the Oracle tried to look at Bryce's future, she was blinded for a week. And so Bryce was upset. She was crying. Her father like disowned her and was like, don't come back here. And this cat came up to her and just started talking to her. And she was like, what the fuck?
She's like, wow, I love cats.
And he's like, I'm Adis, the Prince of the Chasm. He probably didn't say that, but
I mean, I think he did tell her that he was a Prince of Hell, and she was just like, yeah, okay.
maybe. I think he at least like gave his name, and she probably just figured it out.
Yeah,
especially because of where she works. Yeah. But then Bryce decides to summon him to like ask him questions about the Crystallos.
He's
But then he appears
baddie.
as a little hottie, like a little, like kind of strange looking, but also good looking.
Like I was into it.
Yeah, I was like, ooh, Bryson Adis, you know?
I was
And
like,
he
yes.
like tells her to make the drop and come find him. And then he like appears in a dream as well and like repeats it.
I know. I was like, oh, he's visiting her in her dreams.
Yeah.
And then we
Yeah.
also see him in the epilogue where we find out that he has known Jessica for a while now and dropped some knowledge about Hunt's father. Apparently, Jessica knew him. And also gave us some more information about Thea and like the First War and how he was there. And it sounds like, he kind of interfered with the war maybe. And so Jessica basically is like, promise that you don't fuck up this time. And he was like, why would I when things are about to get so interesting? So Adis will be making a return.
And we love him.
And I love that for us. Also, I think he's into Bryce. And
yes.
I'll talk about
Who
that
isn't
too.
Though?
I know everyone's in love with Bryce, and he was like, "Oh, do you want me to like change forms, like something closer to Hunt? Like, would that make you happy?" And I was like, "Oh,
he's like, is that what you're into?"
He's like, I can be that for you.
That meathead. Love it.
I thought that was so funny. He's like, "Oh, like yeah, I was just a cat, so I didn't scare you last time, but you're a grown woman now.
Yeah.
Like, what are you into?"
He's like, I can be anything you want me to be, baby.
Therian is another just great comic relief. He actually turns out to be a real homie though. At the end there, he like again loves Bryce. Everyone does. It's in a joking way though, because he likes to get under Hunt's skin, which I thought was hilarious.
He calls her legs.
Which is so cute. Therian is the captain of intelligence for the River Queen. He met Hunt when his little sister was murdered and he was put on the case and ended up taking down that guy and murdered him slowly, which I thought was awesome for him. Therian is another character to watch out for. He does become a main character in the second book, along with a bunch of these other people that we've talked about. So super excited to talk more about him next week, 2 weeks from now.
They all get more screen time, page time. And then lastly, we're going to talk about Ethan, who is Connor's little brother. So Connor was Danica's like second in command of the pack, basically. And Bryce and Connor had like a thing. They hadn't really been official yet, but like they had a thing. So Ethan used to be one of Bryce's best friends, but he felt super betrayed because after the murders, Bryce's phone messages were leaked. And so there were texts like to Danica saying that she hooked up with someone in the bathroom, even though she had just agreed to go on a date with Connor. And so Ethan felt like really betrayed and hurt by that. Completely cut Bryce out of his life, and it was really sad. I hated when Bryce went to the den and Ethan was acting so cold to her.
I know, but I get it. I do, because like that probably really hurt him.
Yeah, he was very upset. And then at the end of the book, they kind of have this moment of reconciliation. Yeah, because like he realizes that Bryce really is the person that he remembers her as when she's getting everyone
just had
to safety.
Heal differently.
So
little baby.
A quick overview of the characters.
An hour and a half later, here we are.
Yeah, jeepers. I said quick, but ooh.
We'll keep the next part, things we like, things we didn't like, pretty short so we can get to the theories, which is what we're all here for. There are a lot of things that we really did love about this book. Something that I liked was first of all, the frat pack. I think they were my favorite part of this entire book, which we talked about them already. But I also really love just like Bryce's character in general, and like all of, like the slapstick kind of comedy they have. So like there's a lot of just like hidden, like just really quick comments that like Hut will make or Bryce will make or like Rune will make, and like you don't really catch them the first time, but you'll go back and reread it and it's like, oh my god, that was hilarious.
They are so funny.
Or just like really funny scenes that you're just like, what's happening? So like whenever Bryce kills Micah and she's just like low-key vacuuming up his body, I was like, wow, that was such a heart-wrenching scene we've just watched after Lahaba dies, and then she's just gonna vacuum him up. Like that's totally fine.
Absolutely. I think that is the most
my ideal humor
of the book. Yeah.
Because it's like I just spent 10 minutes sobbing.
And then we were like, Bryce is gonna die, but nope, she wins and then vacuums him up. We love so many things, but just a couple things that I love. I love Syrinx, and I love
Syrinx.
The otter messengers. They're so cute.
Yes.
And then one of my favorite things between Bryce and Hunt is the fact that Bryce discovers that Hunt like doesn't have any pictures on his phone except for like crime scene photos, and so she just starts randomly taking pictures to add to his phone. I think it's just really cute.
I also thought another cute moment between them was when Hunt found her like unicorn
Jelly Jubilee
and thought they were dildos, and she like takes pictures of them like tucked in his bed or like put along like the back of his chair. I think that was so freaking cute. They really did have a lot of just like great domestic scenes, which you don't see a lot in books like this. And I am so glad that she did put those in there because it really humanizes both of them.
Yeah.
Especially Hunt, who I think has never had a chance to be like normal in his life. So that just gave him like a sense of security and a sense of normalcy. And it was really just nice.
Yeah, because like for me, it's like
Bryce changing her name in his phone, or like,
I know, it's so cute. And it's like ultimately I don't think that their end game.
I don't either.
Personally.
I think they're great friends though.
I think that they needed each other. I think that their friendship is so important. They both needed a friend so badly. And I love their relationship. I don't think that they're going to be romantically involved forever.
I don't either. And I think part of like the, sexual tension between them is because like they didn't really have another outlet to like kind of display that love.
Yeah.
And so they're like, well, it makes sense that, we'd be romantically interested in each other because we're already on the same page, like on all these other aspects. Yeah. And so I do feel like,
and they feel so vulnerable with each other.
Yes.
And I think that just kind of
it makes them feel safe
for a lot of people. Which
Definitely.
Is like, there's nothing wrong with that. But
I mean, it's like the same thing that happened with like Feyre and Tamlin. It's like she needed that at the time and he was able to provide that for her, and she was giving him something he needed, and so that led to like a sense of safety where they thought they were in love, which they weren't.
Yeah, for sure. I do think that if and when they do end their romantic relationship, I think they will remain friends, like super close.
I think they're gonna end up being allies. I don't know where the series is headed, if I'm being wholly honest. I have no idea, but I think Hunt has a lot of stuff to figure out for himself. Because so does Bryce, but I'm just saying, like, with all the hints they've given us about like Hunt's past, I feel like he's going to be presented with like a lot of challenges in the next books, and so figuring out who his father is, I think it's going to be somebody who is very powerful, very like well known, and it's going to be a lot for him to overcome. And then I also think we're going to see maybe a shift in like where his loyalties lie. So like I do think he's still like a sympathizer towards the human cause.
Yes.
As much as he wants a normal life, I don't think that's what he was meant to do. And so I do think they're going to have a lot of challenges coming up for both of them.
For sure.
But that normalcy for the book was great in conclusion.
Yes, it was. And the list of things we did not like is shorter. I think, honestly, we'll just call this list one thing. Hunt's foot fetish.
Hunt's foot fetish was just out of the blue. I did not think that was necessary, and I was disturbed.
Out of pocket, Sarah J.
It's like, Sarah J, you've written what I would consider to be young adult up until the second ACOTAR book.
Yeah.
But never in your whole writing career have you ever written anything so devastating.
As Hunt being in love with Bryce's toes.
But that kind of wraps up, like, I guess the first half of what we wanted to cover. We are going to transition into the theory aspect of this episode. Let's start with the horn. I think the horn is obviously a very big part of this. That's what they were looking for the whole book. So the horn is described as the language of the universe. And on page 12, they also say it's an ancient Fae relic that was taken across the rift when they came by Luna, who both the Fae and the wolf shifters worship. So when I think of the horn, so basically the horn like opens up different portals. Like the horn was like the key to open up the different gates. And you can like travel through the gates. You can do whatever you need to. It doesn't really, they're not sure where they open up to, because Ada said it can open up literally anywhere, like different worlds, different realms. So in A Court of Silver Flames, they kind of talk about a different artifact that also does the same thing, which was the harp. Mm-hmm. And so when Nesta finds the harp in the prison, it says the harp says, "We shall open doors and pathways. We shall move through space and eons together. Our music will free us of earthly rules and borders." And so I think either the harp and the horn are the same artifact, but it also reminds me of the cauldron, mm-hmm. which also created the universe, or maybe all three of them belong together. So I'm not sure, but I also have a passage, it makes me sound like I'm reading the Bible. There's a passage, there's a passage I'm going to read in A Court of Silver Flames that Rhys talks about, and it really just kind of, like, I vaguely remembered it when I was reading this book again. Mm-hmm. It's a little long, so stick with me. So Rhys had a book of legends from his personal library that he brought out, and he says, "The Fae were not the first masters of this world. According to our oldest legends, most now forgotten, we were created by beings who were near gods and monsters, the Daglin. They ruled for millennia and enslaved us and the humans. They were petty and cruel and drank of the land like wine. Some strains of mythology claim that one of the Fae heroes who rose up to overthrow them was Fionn, who was given the great sword of Gwydion by the high priestess Oleana, who dipped it in the cauldron itself. Fionn and Gwydion overthrew the Daglin, and a millennium of peace followed, and the lands were divided into rough territories that were precursors to the courts. But at the end of those 1,000 years, they were at each other's throats on the brink of war. Fionn unified them and set himself as High King, the first and only High King this land has ever had." So then Feyre asks what happened to the High King, and Rhys says that Fionn was betrayed by his queen, who had been leader of her own territory, and by his dearest friend, who was his general. They killed him, taking some of his bloodline's most powerful and precious weapons, and then out of the chaos that followed, the 7 High Lords rose, and the courts have been in place ever since. So I think some of those tools that they took over was the horn. Because the horn was brought over. But then Fionn and Oleana reminded me of the story of Peleus, Thea, and Helena.
Yeah.
So those three, basically Peleus was Thea's high general, mm-hmm. and he was betrothed to Helena. And so whenever he says that Fionn was betrayed by his queen, I think his queen was Thea, and his high general was Peleus, and they came over through the rift. And they were all 3 starborn as well.
Yes.
And so another one of the artifacts I think they took was the Star Sword.
Okay.
And the Star Sword has a matching dagger, mm-hmm. and I think somehow that was left behind when everybody came through the rift because it hasn't been reunited.
Yeah.
And when they...
Okay. Oh, yes. So I just want to add something to this because I think it solidifies your original theory about, okay, we're backtracking a little bit, but it's extra evidence. So you know how you said the harp is similar to the horn,
Mm-hmm.
and the horn can only be used by a starborn fae, correct?
Yes.
So the symbol of the starborn
Is the eight-pointed
is the
star.
eight-pointed star,
Yes.
which Nesta's tattoo that she gets when she makes a deal with Cassian is an eight-pointed star.
Well, and also when she went to the prison, the harp was sitting on top of a large rendering of an eight-pointed star.
Mm-hmm.
And
Which is
so
on her back as well.
right before that, they said Reese told me once that the island might have even been an eighth court.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think maybe the Starborn are from the eighth court and came over in the rift.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I do know. You're right. We're
You
right.
know?
Yeah.
Because then Helena, whenever they're talking about Peleus and Thea and Helena, Thea had two daughters, but only Helena was starborn. The other one wasn't even mentioned, but they described her as night-haired Helena, whose golden skin poured starlight and shadows.
Which
and I was
is
like,
Rhysand.
sound familiar? Like,
yeah, that's
and Rhysand's family
Rhys.
runs that territory.
Yeah, exactly.
But it didn't used to be theirs. It's just always been, as far as he knows, in their family's protection. And like also they talked about like the forged items that Nesta made and how there were other swords of legend that were lost. And I think one of them is the Star Sword. So I do think that's all connected. And also, yeah, just
in conclusion,
remind me to bring that up again too whenever we talk about book 2, that passage I just read, because I think that's going to be relevant for the next time as well.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Even more so, I would say.
Even more so relevant. But I just remember that. I was like, oh my God. It's all making sense.
I would like to read, just, speaking of the Star Sword. So the lore of the Star Sword in Crescent City. So it says, I once heard someone say the sword was made from iridium mined from a meteorite forged in another world before the Fae had come through the Northern Rift, which again lines up with everything we just talked about.
Right.
And then something that is written above the Fae archives, where Rune found all of this research, is it says, when knife and sword are reunited, so shall our people be. So that just means that the people who have the sword came from where the knife was from, which is where Akatar is. Prithian.
Oh, it's all interconnected and it's making my head hurt.
It goes all the way to the top.
With the rift, it says Midgard was full of humans and animals, but the Vanir took over. Creatures came through the rift. So yeah, the creatures came through a rift in Prithian too, and that's how Amryn got there.
Yeah, but it's like, it makes sense because the harp is there.
Well, also Ada said the horn, like you can open it literally anywhere. And so maybe wherever Amryn was, like it just happened to have been opened.
Yeah.
And she fell through and it closed again. Yeah. But she also said her father was like a super powerful being. So what if...
Because when I first read this book, my first thought when I read about the fallen Asteri is that it was referring to Amryn. However, then I remembered that Amryn talked about she was a warrior for a vengeful god. So I was like, that doesn't really fit because the Asteri themselves don't claim to have been warriors. They created angels to be their warriors. But then I started leaning towards Amryn being the same type of Vanir that Fury is. And we don't know what Fury is either.
Right.
But she doesn't have the exact same physical features.
I do also think, yeah, Avalon, they're all descended maybe from the Night Court or like the Eighth Court, because it's a mist-shrouded island in the north, a sacred heart of Theta. And Rune can summon the shadows and he can speak to minds, which I think he's a Damati for sure. And most Avalon Fae have that ability as well. So I think they could be descendants of the Night Court or possibly Hybern, because the king of Hybern's niece and nephew were also Damati. Yeah. But they didn't have the shadow ability.
And the physical features seem more
Night Court.
Like the dark hair, striking blue eyes, golden skin.
So the other one that I saw, let me try to find it. Hold on.
Just kind of adding off of that while you're looking for it, then the Valbaran Fae then tend to be resemble more of the Autumn Court
The
from
Autumn Court.
ACOTAR with the red hair and the fire powers.
So with this starlight, it says that it is a gift of an ancient fae reborn again. So when it said reborn, it made me think of Farah or her sisters or Miriam. But then when you said Nesta had the 8-pointed star tattooed on her back, she was one of the reborn fae.
Yeah.
And so maybe when we're thinking back to Farah's family, right? Like we don't know anything about her mom, but her dad was able to find the Fae very quickly and like basically amass an army to help fight against Hybern. Mm-hmm. And so I still think that Feyre and her sisters are descended from the Fae because Feyre's name is from the old language. Well, the old language, which they talk about the old language in this book as well.
Yeah, because Bryce learned it.
And the Autumn King only writes in the Fae language.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that Thea, well, I don't even know if it's Thea. Like, I think maybe the Starborn are somehow derived from the Eighth Court, and maybe Nesta has something to do with the Eighth Court. Because I think their family, like the old Fae, were maybe from the Eighth Court.
Like Nesta, because when she was in the cauldron, it's like she just took its power. So
yeah,
I think whatever power she took just happens to be the power that was given to the Eighth Court in the first place from the cauldron.
Sure.
And I think she just stole it and happens to have the same power.
Interesting. Because we don't really know like what her power is. She's a death goddess. I don't know. But I just think it's weird that the starlight is the gift of an ancient fae reborn again. And there's only 4 of those.
Yeah. I mean, it has to be Nesta then.
And then speaking of the Autumn King, I have a lot of stuff about him as well because
go into that.
Well, if you have anything to talk about too, just let me know.
I do have something to talk about later, but it's not something that we've talked about yet. So
okay. Also, this one doesn't matter, but did you notice that? So they live on the planet Midgard, and Feyre fought the Midgard worm.
Okay, so let me talk about mine really quick because
does that have to do with that?
Kind of. Okay, so yes, I did notice that, and okay, so in the world of Crescent City, I'm actually going to talk about a couple of things. I'm sorry.
Okay, no, you're fine.
In the world of Crescent City, the Fae have been here for a long time, but they're not from here. Like that's established. They came through the rift. And the Autumn King is telling Rune, the Fae have long been fading. Our power wanes with each generation. And I think that's because the Fae's powers, they're very attached to the world around them.
Yes, they draw their power like in Prythian.
Yes. So in Prythian, in ACOTAR, Prythian is itself alive with magic. And the Fae draw their powers from the magical land that they live in. And they have been separated from Prythian for now thousands
15,000 years, yeah.
At least. So there's that. That explains, again, that they came through the rift from Prythian, like you were saying. Thea and what's his name? Pelias came over.
Pelias.
I pronounce that different too.
Pelias.
Listen, ma'am, I haven't listened to an audiobook.
You should. They're very good.
Okay. The second thing I was going to talk about. So because the magic here is not in the land, it's only in
the first light,
the being themselves and the first light that's harvested. In order for Vanir to fully fall into their powers, they must first complete an ordeal and make the drop in this world of Midgard. So Rune is kind of describing, like narrating what the ordeal is. The ordeal itself varied depending on the person. For some, it might be as simple as overcoming an illness or a bit of personal strife. For others, it might be slaying a worm or a demon. The greater the Fae, the greater the ordeal.
Oh, and Farah had to go through the trials. That was like her ordeal.
Under the mountain was the ordeal. And then she made the drop. And Reese was her anchor.
Oh my God.
Reese
Yeah,
literally
because
ate her.
literally she was
Because
tied to him.
when they talk about coming back up to your anchor, they talk about swimming up, like,
And that's what
that's what
she
Farrah
did.
described.
Oh my God.
So when Farrah was reborn from a human to a fae, she actually made the drop.
Yeah.
And I think the reason she was
With
able to
a
do that,
spark of everybody's light.
yeah, I think the reason she was able to do that is because she's descended from fae. And I think she has fae heritage somewhere in her because, like,
Yeah.
Bryce, only people that make the drop, or only people with some kind of
Power can make
linear
the drop.
ability will make the drop. So I think that Farrah's family
Oh,
has to be descended from fae.
you're so right. I didn't even think about that.
Anyways,
Oh, mind
when
blown.
you said the Midgardian worm, I was like, okay.
No, I was just like, wow, what a weird coincidence that was.
I was like, here I come, don't
You're
worry.
so right. And yeah, Rune even mentioned the worm. Oh my God.
I love it.
So the Autumn King, I think this is another thing that kind of ties them back to Prithian as well. And I'm gonna talk quite a bit about him because I think he's sketchy as fuck.
Yes.
So on page 152, Rune mentions that he's using an orrery, which is a model of their 7 planets, moons, and suns. So you hear about an orrery in a previous book, in A Court of Silver Flames. And so I am going to read the passage really quick because it sounds familiar. So it says there was a main floor of the study, bedecked in hand-knotted blue carpets that Farrah had gone to Sasir to select from the artisans, with its 2 sitting areas, Reese's desk, and twin long tables near the bookshelves. At the far end of the room, a little dais led to a broad raised alcove flanked by more books, and at its center, a massive working model of their world, the stars and planets around it. And some of the other fancy things that had been explained to Cassian once before he deemed them boring and proceeded to ignore them completely. As, of course, had been fascinated, Reese had built the model himself centuries ago. It could not only track the sun, but also tell time, and somehow allowed Reese to ponder the existence of life beyond their world and other things. They didn't say how many planets there were, but I think somehow the Autumn King got Reese's orrery. Like it somehow ended up coming over. I don't know. See, the one thing I'm not sure about is like the time frame of these.
Yeah.
Because if they passed over the rift in the first war, and that was with Thea, or not Thea, with like that original group, that was long before Reese was there. But Reese made it himself. And so I don't know if the Autumn King like inherited it because, well, I can't talk about it yet. But in the second book, there's another person that also has an orrery. But basically, when Rune asked his father what he was looking for, patterns was all he replied. And so I think he knows that the horn can open up gates to other universes. And I think he knows that other universes exist because they have the ancient Fae tomes that no one else is allowed to look at. And I think maybe he's found old writing suggesting that they're
it's
like
interesting too, because I feel like we could kind of go off of that. So he's looking for patterns. So Midgard is a pattern because in the world of Prithian, the rifts have already been opened and other beings have already come over. And then it happens again and they go to Midgard. So like that in itself is a pattern. You think he could be referring to that as well?
I think so.
Because
so I think the Autumn King has
also mentioned. I'm so excited.
The horn doesn't just open up to like
to other realms, but other planets as well.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And so I think the Autumn King knows that. I don't know how he knows it, but I think he knows a lot because
to Adis.
Well, and remember that he killed the first star, like the last starborn, supposedly. Yeah. And so I think there's something going on with that. And like, he knows like where they're descended from. And that's also why he writes in the old language of the Fae, because that's all those tomes were written in. So I think the Autumn King knows a lot more than he's letting on, or he has talked to somebody who has told him about what actually happened.
Yeah.
I just thought it was very interesting that he's also studying the Ori. That was exactly what Rhysand had.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't like pay attention to that.
And then also just the library itself. the library is very interesting because in ACOTAR and Throne of Glass, the libraries are also like main components of them, like either winning a war or like getting the knowledge they need. So like in ACOTAR, they have the library that is under the house where like all of the priestesses work. And then in Throne of Glass, there is a library that has basically all of the knowledge like of the world. And that's where like only a select few scholars can go there to study. And then you have this library of Parthos. And obviously we know that it can be picked up and moved to like a different location. So I'm wondering if the library is all the same, because whenever Bryce was looking for like books on the shelf, she talked about the Book of Breathings. And she also talked about The Walking Dead, which is from Throne of Glass.
Ooh,
and so
okay.
I think it's all the same. And the only thing I don't get is that the Book of Breathings was put in the cauldron, right?
Yeah.
And then cast out to sea. So I'm not sure how they came across the Book of Breathings, or if that was just an Easter egg.
Well,
same thing with The Walking Dead.
And so like that's two things now that we're unsure what they would have gotten there, is like the books and the orrery. But that's not to say that it couldn't have happened.
Right.
I don't know how they would have come over yet.
And I also think they talked about how in Parthos there were priestesses that guarded the library, and there's priestesses that guard the library in ACOTAR as well.
Yes. And okay, that leads me to my next thing whenever
Well, I think Jessica is somehow either descended from a priestess or she is one of the priestesses, and that's why she's been tasked to like guard the library. And Adis, which I'll talk about Adis too, he's also connected to the library, and I think that's how Adis and Jessica know each other.
Okay. I could see that. Yeah. Because like you're saying, Jessica is probably older, and
I think she's really old.
Yeah. What I was going to say is the Archesian amulet that Jessica gave to Bryce. They keep making a big deal about it, how expensive it is. There's only a few in the world. That's what the priestesses wore to protect them when they guarded the books. And okay, so this is actually something that I read on Reddit. So this is posted by iLauren37. So iLauren37 says, what if the Archesian amulet is referring to the Archeron sisters? It's made of 3 gold hoops, and there's 3 sisters.
Oh.
And it's like the first letters are ARCHE, like Archeron.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just don't know.
Interesting, because when I read about the Archesian amulet and it was like 3 interconnecting circles, it made me think of the 3-faced goddess, which they talked about in this book a little bit, like the witches worship the 3-faced goddess. But in Throne of Glass, there's also witches that are very similar to these witches, and they also worship a 3-faced goddess. And Amren even talks about a 3-faced goddess in that book, but they refer to her as the mother. And the mother was the one who created the cauldron, or brought the cauldron over.
Yes. So the amulet could be representing the mother rather than them.
Which I don't know for a fact. It was just a theory, but I like that one better about the Archeron sisters.
Yeah, because I don't know either, because this person also responded to the thread, and they said the Archesian amulets were worn by the priestesses that guarded Parthos 15,000 years ago. And they didn't seem convinced.
And that's why Jessica has them, because she was one of the priestesses.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. But this person didn't seem convinced that it had to do with the Archeron sisters. But anyway.
Interesting. I think Jessica is super, super old, and
at least 15,000 years.
Yeah, what if that's why she has those books, because she took them over?
Yeah.
Parthos was there before, though.
Parthos was in Midgard, What is now
Right.
Midgard.
So
So
what
I
if
just think
she
she's
came?
always lived there.
Maybe. Oh. So Adis's character, I think, has maybe been in the other two books. So when Adis first appears to Bryce, he takes the form of a cat, right? And he has very like feline features. If you'll remember in Silver Flames, whenever Nesta talks to the house or goes down like the stairs in the library, she feels a feline presence. And
The house
then,
itself is
mhm,
like a feline presence as well.
right. And then in Throne of Glass, the main character also is accompanied by like a random feline presence that guides her. And so I think Adis is somehow connected to like all three. I just don't know how, but I just thought it was weird that he decided to show up in the form of a cat. And then it's also talked about like a feline presence in the other two books as well. And it's usually when they need guidance,
Huh.
you know?
Yeah, like I don't know why it's important yet, but it's definitely important.
I also just really, I don't know. I think it's just wishful thinking, but I really want him and Bryce to be together. I don't think they will. But and now that
I shipped them the
I
first book.
did ship them, but now that I've like read it again, I do think it sounds like he was maybe in love with Thea, or
Mm,
at least was like in awe of her.
yeah.
And Bryce has Thea's light. And so
Yes.
that's why I was like, well, maybe
And
that's
I
how they're
wonder
going
if
to end
Bryce
up together.
also resembles Thea, like features
Right.
wise.
And so I was like, I wonder if they're going to end up together. I don't know though. I really
Yeah.
don't. I hope they do because I really liked Adis. I thought he was
I
a
like
very
Adis too.
neat character. But I do think he is present in all three of the books. So the goddess Luna, who has the horn,
Hmm.
there were aspects of her that made me think of Feyre. So the statue in like where she's at in Crescent City is made from moonstone, which is the
Hmm.
same thing that the house in Akatar is made out of.
Yeah.
That Farah sees like in her vision when she's like in the cell. And then like the twin wolves at her feet. So Farah's often depicted herself like as a wolf or has used like a wolf like in different forms, like the wolves, like when she made water and stuff. Then the
And
golden bow and
she
arrows.
murdered the wolf
She murdered the
at the
wolf.
beginning.
The moon crown is like the phases of the moon, like what Feyre has on her back.
Hmm.
And then the horn also has a crack in it, just like the cauldron did whenever Feyre used it. But that could also mean that Peleus is descended from them too, because he was technically the one who used the horn to close the rift. So I
Hmm.
don't know. But I think it's weird that the horn and the cauldron both had cracks in it once they were used. And like you
Yeah.
have to use like your power to like repair them basically.
Hmm.
I just thought there was a lot of like resemblance there. I don't think it's her, obviously, because Luna never took a lover and was like a maiden,
Yeah.
but like maybe descended or like somehow related or like just a depiction.
Yeah, and like, well, maybe Pharaoh was just like quote unquote made in Luna's image, you
Yeah,
know.
true. So we already talked about the Viper Queen. Oh, so the thing I was going to say about the Viper Queen. So I won't say names or anything, but in Throne of Glass, there is a very old ancient power who basically ties people. She has like a cabal basically of like Fey warriors
Hmm.
that she ties to her through like a mixing of blood. And she has like something in her.
A venom, if you will.
Yeah, basically. And so like it made me think of the Viper Queen because that's basically what she does to her
Yeah.
warriors. And I don't
Yeah.
know if it was just like a resemblance or what, but I was like, huh,
I mean,
interesting.
they could just be the same type of, because I don't think people necessarily like the heads of the like different areas.
Like even Micah stays away from her.
Yeah, I don't think they know necessarily how long they've been there, like where they're from.
Mm-hmm.
Because they mentioned with like the River Queen that she herself is like the daughter of
A
Ogenes.
goddess.
Yeah, like she is like she's been there a long freaking time.
Right.
So the
The
Viper
River
Queen very
Queen
well could have.
is I think the River Queen is going to play a role as well,
I love the River
personally.
Queen.
And then with Fury, so we know that she was pretending to be a student and that she was actually an assassin for the Republic. Nobody knows what house she's from, and it's rude to ask, and no one knows anything about her lineage. But on page 227, Fury said that she knew Jessica from her Jessica's time like spent in the Republic, and that's how she got Bryce a job.
Yes.
And so I wonder how Fury and Jessica know each other, and if Jessica hiring Bryce had something to do with her relation to Thea, which goes back to Adis. And so I wonder if Fury
Oh.
is somehow in the mix there.
Like they all kind of know more about Bryce's destiny than
Yes.
Bryce herself does.
Well, and all they said was that Fury made the drop at 21. They didn't say how long ago she had made the drop.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. And it's
So,
like, okay, she made the drop at 21. You met her when she was in college, but she was just pretending to be in college. She's actually an assassin. So
right,
that bitch has got to be old.
right.
Like, you don't just become an assassin
Well,
immediately
and
after
then
making the
they
drop.
also had her at the summit, and they didn't say what it was for, but she was placed like pretty close to like the inner circle to like listen in and like basically observe the summit itself. So I want to know like who does she work for, and like
Yeah.
basically like where her loyalties lie, because I do think she's loyal to Bryce, but she obviously has inner workings with Jessica,
Yeah.
and she apparently trusted Jessica enough to basically force her to hire Bryce. Either that or like that was like a plan all along.
It is interesting because it's like we also don't super know what Jessica's motives are, but I think like it seems like Jessica and Adis, like, so Adis is talking about like, Bryce, come find me when you make the drop so we can finish this. It's like
Mm-hmm.
it seems like they also want to overthrow the Asteri.
Right.
So I think that Fury works for the Republic because it's like, keep your friends close and your enemies closer.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah, and if
think her
she's
loyalties
trusted, she
lie
could
with
probably access
the
like a lot of
rebellion.
stuff. Interesting.
Yeah. And like you were saying earlier, too, I think Fury knows a lot more about Danica because I think her and Danica like want similar things.
And then the last one is just talking about Hunt. So I think, like I said, his father is going to be someone important
I
because
was
when he
trying
goes
to
to,
think like who like do we know any other characters that could be like lightning related?
well, that's what he said is that he tried to find someone to teach him how to control his lightning, but he's the only person who has it. And so
I
he ended
know,
up
but
teaching
then it's like
himself.
what I think is weird though is like the Oracle. The
Said, you
Oracle
remind me of
said,
that which was lost long ago. I had not
yeah.
realized it might ever reappear again.
So it's like that's not referring to his dad then?
I don't know. We don't know who his dad is.
I know, but
And
it's
his
like how
mom
long
never
ago
told
did his
him.
dad die?
And then when Adis saw him, he said, a fallen warrior with the power of, and then he said, what are you doing with a black crown? So
Mm-hmm.
Adis knows what his power is and is
Yeah.
like, I know who your daddy is.
Right.
Um, and then right at the end in the epilogue, when Jessica asked him, what about Athlar? He said, I think Athlar's father would have been proud. Feel free to disagree. You knew the male the best.
Mm-hmm.
And so Jessica knows who his dad is.
Yeah. And
And
it's like,
Hunt's the only one who does it.
how long ago did his dad
But he
die? Like,
also just never asked. And so I think Hunt maybe does know who his father is. I feel like
okay.
Hunt is like, I don't know. I feel like he's keeping something.
Hmm.
Or that, or he doesn't remember.
Yeah. I mean, because like his
What
mom,
if,
he
like,
made the drop like right after his mom died. So he was like what, like in his 20s when he made the drop? Because then he fought for Shaw.
yeah,
He was really young, like 28 or
he was
something.
28. Yeah.
So maybe he really just never knew who his dad was. Maybe his
Maybe.
dad died before he was old enough to know.
I don't know.
And that
It's
would
in,
make sense that like the Oracle was like, wow, I thought it was lost long ago. Because at that point, it'd be like 200 and some years ago that he would have been
yeah.
dead.
So obviously his dad is going to be a big part of this, and
Yeah.
I think that's going to make a difference in how Hunt is as a person. And this isn't really like anything, it's just something I noticed is that they use the number 7 for like everything. So 7 Asteri, 7 High Lords, there's 7 Princes of Hell. In Throne of Glass, there's a different set of 7 princes. And then
7 planets,
the 7 planets.
7
So,
gates, 7 neighborhoods.
well, there's 7 heads of Lunathian.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, which I thought was interesting, all the 7s, considering there are only 5 gods.
right? So I don't think the gods matter.
Yeah.
Or they don't exist at all.
Or there's 2 gods that they forgot about, like as
Ooh.
time went on.
Also, did you notice? Okay, so this is just another thing I think connects ACOTAR in this book together. In Mist and Fury, when Feyre decides to finally go out with like the inner circle and stuff, Cassian and Amryn are talking about their favorite sport team, and I think it's Sunball.
Oh my God, that's so cute.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, like, this is just like maybe just like similar in like her, like what she decided to write, but I thought the scene where Bryce apologized to Hunt by making him a meal, I was like, is that part of her like Fae instincts? Because like
Oh,
like
Feyre
to
made Reese.
yeah, to solidify the mating bond, like they like make them a meal. Which
Maybe.
yeah, I know that it's not exactly the same because like they're not both Fae and there's not like an actual mating bond. But I was like, maybe it's just part of her like
Like
her
it's an
Fae.
inclination to like
Yeah.
maybe. Um, but the last thing is I don't know if Adis and Bryce are mates, but I think that even though she gave up her spot in the Bone Quarter, it won't matter because if she ends up with the Prince of Hell, then her soul will just go there.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, which I could see her just like, even if they're not mates, I could see Adis just being like, you're coming home with me.
Yeah. I don't know, but
Like, let's go raise hell, bestie.
that's a lot, but I think there are definitely a lot of things that cross over. There's a lot of evidence that it does. I just don't know when.
Yeah. And we don't know how many books there are going to be. We're in for a wild ride.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, join us next week. We are going to be fan casting Crescent City.
It's gonna be great.
That'll be exciting.
And then the week after that, we're just going to dive right into the second Crescent City book, House of Sky and Breath. So I would go ahead and start on that.
Yeah, it is another
These are beefy
boy.
books.
So yeah, go ahead, get started on that. We will talk to you then. And as always,
Let's get lit.